today's webinar, which is hosted by Organization Development and Change and Workforce Education Development Program at Penn State College of Education. As you know, this is a monthly webinar series presented during our lunch hour. My name is Isa Al-Balushi. I'm a PhD holder in Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State University. I'm so glad to be moderating this session today, along my colleague, Jose Sandoval, who is also a PhD candidate in the Learning Design Technology Program at Penn State University. In terms of the interactive format for this webinar, please use the chat feature in the Zoom platform. If you have any questions about the presentation, please use chat feature on Zoom platform. You can see the chat button at the bottom of the screen. The Q&A session will be at the end of the presentation. Our online master degree of professional studies on organization development and change are designed for professionals like you who need the skills and knowledge to effectively lead change in their organization. Furthermore, there is a master degree and PhD programs in workforce education development with a focus on the human resource development and organization development. Our program has created a continuous monthly webinar series with experts around the world. Today, we are presenting meaningful partnership at work, ensuring mutual accountability and success between leaders and teams, which will be presented by Dr. Timothy France and Dr. Seth Silver. Dr. Silver is the principal of Silver Consulting, independent consulting practice, where he has worked with hundreds of clients, organizations, the healthcare, higher education, high tech, government, business services, manufacturing, and nonprofit organizations. Our second presenter today is Dr. Franz, who's an industrial and organizational psychologist at St. Joseph Fisher University. He's also a professor and term chair of the Department of Psychology and past graduate program director of the Graduate Human Resource Development Program. He works as an organization consultant through his consulting organization, Franz Consulting and GLI. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speakers today, Dr. Franz and Dr. Silver. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you, Jose. Really appreciate you bringing us in today to have this conversation. We're really looking forward to talking about this concept of meaningful partnership at work and really giving you a practical tool for how to create it. Seth?
Thanks, Tim. I echo the thank you again to Isa and Jose and Penn State for inviting us. And so let's jump right in. Let's get going on an icebreaker. And if you see these quotes here, these are some of, many from our book. And they speak to principles and ideas that are related to meaningful partnership, something called ERTAP that we'll describe later, something called workplace covenants that we'll describe later. So what I'd like you to do now is take a moment and pick one, just one quote that jumps off the page for you. And then we'll hear from 3 or 4 people quickly which quote you picked and why, and then we'll proceed into our presentation. So you've got 1 minute to pick. And perhaps I can see some of the names of people who are with us today.
Okay, Seth, I will call on 4 people.
Okay.
And so then you can
debrief with them.
Ask them follow-up questions. So we are going to start with Candace Griffin, and next will be DeAndrea Thompson for our second one. Candace, what quote and why? Did Candace just drop off? Yes.
Oh, Candace didn't know we were going to pick on her.
Okay. DeAndrea Thompson. And then
all right, DeAndrea,
next
you're up.
Will be Caitlin Farnan.
DeAndrea, you're up.
I'm here. I just joined.
Yep.
We're asking you to pick a quotation.
What quote and why?
My favorite quote.
I didn't hear. Repeat.
Irrelevant. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. What's one quote on this page that jumps off the page for you that you picked?
Empathy leads to synergy.
Yeah, empathy leads to synergy, a key concept in what we will be talking about today. Tim, who's our third speaker?
It's only our second because one dropped
Mhm.
off for a second. So Caitlin Farnon is next, and then we will have Kay Mazzini. Kay Mazzini after that.
I chose the first quote, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much.
Yep. Why? Why'd you pick that one? Why did that jump off the page for you, Caitlin?
I think many of the problems we are facing today, we are seeing leaders who think that they alone have the knowledge and expertise to be able to solve everything. But we're seeing in many cases that there's a variety of experience, knowledge, and skill, and knowledge comes in so many different forms that we need to be able to recognize it and break down some of those barriers and work together to actually create better solutions.
You got it. Like a raindrop is not effective, but a hurricane full of rain is very effective. Yep. And who's our next speaker? Tim, who's the next person?
Can't find them on here anymore.
It's Kay Mazzini.
Kay Mazzini.
Okay.
Which one did you
Thank
pick?
you.
Did you pick a quote? Kay Mazzini? You're still on mute?
Yeah, they can't unmute. Only Isa can. Isa and
Okay.
Jose.
Yeah, they are they can now if they want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Kay Mazzini, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's
moving
move
on
along.
to
So
can we do Ryan West for the last one?
thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Great list. First off, I had a hard time picking, but ultimately settled on number 12. Relationships are the threads of the fabric we call our organization. The better your workplace relationships, the more satisfied and successful you will be.
And you picked it
us.
because
I chose that because I am proof of the power of that statement. Many, many years ago, I learned the power of a team and the relationships that are forged within them. I had developed numerous trainings studying for many, many months, putting them together, but I couldn't open up any doors to share the knowledge that I had accumulated with anybody until I leaned into the marketing team, and they opened up all these doors for me. And I learned, and I'm so glad that I did, that it's not so much what you know, but who you know. And the success that I would say that I have earned over the years is entirely due to the relationship that I've forged.
wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. Our
And by the
book
way, and any one of these that says silver bullet comes from Seth R. Silver. It's one
Oh,
of his
thank you for
quotes. So
that.
you picked one of his quotes.
Thank you for that recognition, Tim. Much appreciated. So, yeah, Ryan, the one you picked really gets to the heart of what our book is about and this presentation is about, and really the science of how to create great workplace relationships. Tim, I think you've got our purpose and agenda.
Yep. So why are we here today? To learn about how to create meaningful partnership at work. And really, in our book and in this presentation, our goal is to give you very practical tools that you can take from here and use. And I will say there's two ways to read our book. One way, and I'm going to pick on some friends of mine. My friend Steve read the book. It took him just over an hour to read it. And he said, yeah, great book. Love the ideas. I took some big concepts from it. That's great. It can be read really quickly. Or my friend Laura, who digested the book, who spent hours reading it and taking down notes. And then a couple of months later sends us a note and says, oh, do you mind if I do this myself in my organization? I know how now. And we said, Laura, that's why we put it in the book. That's exactly why we did what we did. So these tools are things that you can use immediately. And hopefully you'll notice that Seth and I have a little banter and you'll have some fun today, get some ideas. So we've already done the icebreaker. We're going to talk about why this is important, give you some key ideas, and then focus on why these ideas can help you to improve your work relationships. We're trying to leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I might also add that our friend Bill Rothwell read the book and gave us a wonderful testimonial, and I think Bill is on the line with us, which is great.
Bill is on the line. Yep. He's one of our participants today. Thanks, Bill.
We call this the presenting problem. I prefer to call it the origin story. And just to be clear, this is not Charles Darwin, nor is it Genesis from the Bible. But in this case, origin story is where did this whole idea of meaningful partnership start for us? And this whole notion that we're going to get into about obligations and expectations, which is really the heart of a meaningful partnership. So it goes back, and I'll tell the story quickly of when I was at a large upstate New York copier and business equipment manufacturer. And I was manager of organization development, actually, for the largest engineering division. And we had half the group on the West Coast and half here in upstate New York. And I got to do fun things like coaching and leadership training and self-directed work team development. But the fun part was team building. And so the senior level manager, often a chief engineer, and his or her team would go off site for a day, and I'd be the one facilitating it. So I would sit down with the chief engineer or senior manager for an hour or so, maybe a week in advance of the session, and say, what do you need? What do we need to talk about? You want to do sort of touchy-feely stuff like Myers-Briggs? Do you want to get into the trust issues or do some strategic planning? What do you need? And oh, by the way, what's the relationship you have with your team? And invariably, the chief engineer and senior manager would say something along these lines. They're an okay team, but I wish. I wish they would respond to my emails faster. I wish they would settle disputes without involving me. I wish they wouldn't complain about sunrise meetings at 7 a.m. because that's what we do around here. I wish, I wish, I wish. And I wrote all that stuff down and I, thought, okay, this is interesting. And what do I do with it? And then I'd meet with the team without the chief engineer or senior manager, and I'd ask the same questions. Hey, we're going to be off site. Do you want to do touchy-feely stuff like Myers-Briggs, or do you want to get into strategic planning? And oh, by the way, what's the relationship like with your senior boss, your boss? And invariably, the teams would give me the same kind of laundry list. They would say, well, he or she's all right, not bad, not the best we've had, not the worst, but we wish they would appreciate that we put in 12-hour days normally. We wish that he or she would fill an empty position because the extra work's killing us. We wish he or she would advocate strongly and get us the extra headcount that we need, whatever it was. And I walked away from these meetings thinking, this is crazy. This is just absurd. The chief engineer and his or her team, they share a coffee pot, they share bathrooms, they share meeting space, they're all co-located. Don't they talk to each other? And the answer was actually, strangely enough, no. They don't talk as much as they need to about what they need to feel supported and be successful. So it led me to facilitate team building in which both the manager and the team would share expectations of each other. Years later, I connected with Tim, we refined the process, and we incorporated the notion of obligations first and then expectations, and writing stuff down and reviewing it, and the whole science that's outlined in the book. Tim.
So in the next slide, we have some ideas to get you thinking, and we'll be using the chat box. I gave all of you a heads up. We are going to start with a reflection. What is the worst work partner you have ever had? We don't want to know who that is. And that partner may be a boss, it may be a peer, it may be a third party, anything like that. No naming, no shaming. We're not going to put any names in there because mine would be Seth, as you would all expect. And so what we want to know is what made this the worst partnership. What were the attributes, the characteristics? So type into the chat box right now, and Seth will be reading away as we see some
and
things.
Just the worst, just the worst for the moment.
Right, just the worst. So go ahead, type away.
Unreliable and dishonest, indeed. Demanding, manipulative, micromanaging, self-serving. Keep going. Lack of communication, defensive, expected everyone opinionated, unwilling to hear a different viewpoint, know-it-all.
Wow.
Entitled.
These are good ones.
Unclear expectation, lack of common goal, yelling, manipulating.
Okay, so this is a really good list. You can keep typing.
You got
People
the
will
idea.
read it.
Hypocrite.
But
Bias,
now
sexist.
we're going to flip it to the other side. And
Excellent
what
list, folks.
really our goal is to get you thinking about how to make people the best partner rather than the worst partner. So reflecting on the best work partner you've ever had. What are the attributes or characteristics that made them such a great partner? So keep best, listen, keep going, Seth.
Flexibility, empathy,
So
good communicator, best sense of humor, open to new ideas, clear expectations. Interesting sense of humor shows up several times. Collaborative, trustful, generative conversations, honesty, ask questions, shared work, trustworthy. Oh, I love it. Empowering, leveraging strengths, mentor,
yeah.
good
Mentor, one of the
communicator,
most important
trust,
things for a leader to do.
allows for mistakes, available. Indeed. Empowered me. That's a clear theme. Feedback. Open to feedback. Yes, indeed. Open to
Oh,
feedback.
I just saw clear feedback and open to feedback back to back.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Back and
Okay.
forth. So
Good. Trusted me.
okay.
I think you got the idea. You've
Yeah.
experienced both. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Tim.
And you've experienced both. And what you see here is it was really easy to think about that worst partner and really easy to think about that best partner. But more important is, what did it feel like when you were at work, when you had that worst partner? What did it feel like when you went home after work, when you had that worst partner? I've been in that situation, just like so many of you. And, I love this suffocating, great words coming in there, draining,
Oh,
dreading,
I love it.
isolated.
Glass of wine. Sunday night
And
blues.
I've had those multiple glass of wine nights.
Exhausting.
So now, what did it feel like at work or when you went home with your family or your friends when you had that best partner? How did it make you feel about doing your work? So keep those words going out there. These are great, empowering, energizing. Love that one.
Energized.
Satisfying. I made a
You're getting the
difference.
idea
So
here.
yeah. And so this is exactly what we want you to think about, that feeling. And it goes beyond just simply creating a partnership, but what it means for us as members of an employment community, members of an organization, and as members of a family or in our friendships. Go ahead, Seth. I see you have
Yes,
something
if
to
I
say.
may. So the question Tim has asked here is the worst partner, best partner you have ever received. And you very insightfully described what it felt like and what these people were like. Now, here's the $64,000 question. If we were to bring all the people that you've ever worked with into one large room and ask them, what is it like to work with you? What kind of a partner have you been? Were you the worst? Were you the best? Were you in the middle? And so the big question is, what's it like to be on the opposite end of you as a partner? And it begs the question, how have you been for others, which is what our book gets into. What are the partnerships like, and how can you become a best and meaningful partner? Tim.
So, thinking about what that partnership means, the worst partner, why do we need to build partnership? And Seth and I talk about the dreaded 4Ds, which anybody who's seen The Princess Bride, you might get the joke that we have in here. So the dreaded
Forest of
4Ds.
despair,
And so,
dread Pirate Roberts.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but with these 4Ds, again, if you've been through this situation where you've had a worse partner, you have been through this process. It starts with dissatisfaction, that emotional feeling, and leads to a behavior. We disengage, we back off. We're not going to do as much. We're not going to be as present. And then that continued disengagement leads us to another feeling of there's nothing we can do about this. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing we can change. That's that despair. And if we have that and it's not addressed, then we have people leaving. And so this happens all the time at work. And it's really, in many ways, the quality of our relationships that make a difference in how we feel about, again, our work, but it affects our home too. Now, relationships are far more important than people realize. There's a study that's been going on at Harvard for I don't know, it's like 80 years now. It's a
1938.
longitudinal study, 1938. Yeah, and in that study, they track satisfaction with life, satisfaction with work, satisfaction and health outcomes over years and years and years. And what the data show again and again is that it's the quality of our relationships that make a difference in our lives, that make a difference in our health, that make a difference when we retire, that make a difference when we get older.
Single biggest factor in happiness.
Yep. So there you go.
I just wanted to add one other thing to that last slide, is that we talk about the dreaded 4Ds, but it applies not only to employees. We all know employees who have taken a voluntary, have left a place voluntarily, and they probably went through these 4 stages of grief, we can jokingly call it. But it also applies to managers. Managers go through dissatisfaction, disengagement, despair, and departure, or quietly quitting on the disengagement one. So this applies equally to both sides. This dreaded 4Ds is a two-way street of frustration. So I just wanted to add that.
And so what does this mean? This is a realization honestly that Seth and I had after we wrote the book, when we started doing these kinds of talks about the book, and we've done, probably 50 or more now. We realized that a lot of the things that we talk about where people are in a situation with the worst partner, some of these words you even heard: not empowered, not recognized for the work, nowhere to go, treated poorly. That's that disrespect and incivility,
Sexism, gender
which
bias.
happens to, certain people with different backgrounds disrespected and treated poorly, not getting the resources that people need. All these things fundamentally, a lot of different buzzwords we've talked about at work, fundamentally are due to a lack of support from leaders in the organization. And what different people need, this is very personal. What I need for support in my career is very different from what my good friend, colleague, co-author Seth needs, and may be very different from what you need. And it may be very different from somebody who's new in their career versus me, who's, looking towards retirement. What's next in my career? And so it doesn't matter that they're different. What it means is we are not giving them what they need to succeed in their job, to feel supported in order to be successful.
And if I can just add, this is really the key word of our book. Ironically, we realized this, Tim, as you said, somewhat in all those webinars and interviews and such that we did after the book launched. But it is the notion of support. Do people feel supported? Because when they feel supported, guess what? They begin to experience meaningful partnership. So instead of the dreaded 4Ds, the 4 stages of grief, as it were, we feel that meaningful partnership is the 4 Cs. It's really the antidote. It is the vaccine. It is an elevated state of connection, cohesion, coordination, and collaboration, a state in which both parties, manager and team. We should also just anecdotally say here that when we talk about partnership, we've been talking about it as manager and team. It can also be individual to individual. It can be team to team. It can be department A to department B. Tim and I have done a lot of work with this process where it is not just a simple manager and his or her family group of 8 or 10 people, but where there's 2 departments or teams or 2 individuals who have to work closely. So partnership can be in a broader sense of that, or a nonprofit board and the executive team of the nonprofit, for example. But both sides need to feel supported and able to achieve. Both sides need to feel accountable for success of the relationship. And both sides need to engage in a routine exchange of appreciation and helpful, constructive feedback. So this is really the summary of the book. The top of it is the mindset. It is a mindset in which you go to work and you have key relationships, or what we call partnerships, be that with a peer or your manager or your direct reports or key third parties. And you are focused on, how do I help them to feel successful, to feel supported and be successful. The psychological model is ERTAP. Tim's going to talk about it in a moment, but I'll just define it here. It stands for empathy, respect, trust, and alignment, and then partnership, which gets elevated to meaningful partnership. So it's the soil in which partnership grows. And the tool, the way to get there, is what we call a workplace covenant. Please do not be dissuaded by the word covenant. Next slide. It is not a religious term. We do not intend this biblically or religiously in any way. But it is a term used in legal conversations. It's a term used sometimes in an organizational setting to refer to promises. So we mean it as a commitment with obligatory weight, a pledge, a vow, something that invokes personal and professional integrity. A covenant is literally signed, a covenant is reviewed, a covenant is taken seriously. It's not that there's consequences and repercussions. Tim's showing you his with me, and I have mine with him. It's over here. Tim, it's got a little bit of coffee on it, but yeah, there it is. There's mine. So we take it seriously. Next slide.
So Seth introduced the concept, the psychological underpinnings, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Seth started with this origin story. This is Seth's baby. This is Seth's idea. He started this whole process and then brought me in. And there's two reasons I admit I don't like zealots, but I became a bit of a zealot around trying to create meaningful partnership. And one reason is because when Seth described this initial process to me, I saw the organizational psychologist in my, that's my background. And I saw the psychological underpinnings for why this worked, for why it would be important. And Seth and I have put that down as ERTAP: empathy, respect, trust, alignment, and partnership. And so starting with empathy, it's this profound appreciation for the perspective of others and the challenges they faced, whatever those challenges might be from their perspective, what they understand. It's putting yourself in their shoes. And that's the foundation. Our idea of the covenant process helps to build this understanding of what others need to feel supported and be successful. And that leads to respect. And respect in a work context is seeing somebody as a valid and legitimate partner, deserving rights at work that we would expect of ourselves. Once we have respect, it starts to build trust. Trust in the workplace is this feeling of high confidence in the work that others do. When they say they're going to do something, it means that they'll deliver, that they don't speak ill of you behind your back, that they have your back instead. And then once we have empathy, respect, and trust, we can build that alignment, that coming together. So many ways to say that: singing from the same song book, on the tracks together. The analogy we use in the book is two in a canoe paddling smoothly together. And if you've ever been in a canoe, which Seth and I have been, with somebody who paddles well, it's a really peaceful experience. And you're moving towards a goal in alignment together. And that leads to partnership. Now, this is not a trust fall. It's not something that we say, oh, do this because people will feel good. Remember our terms: feel supported in order to be successful. And we'll show the evidence later. We have some, quite a bit. It leads to improved team and organizational performance. There's a clear organizational reason to do this. And so, why use a workplace covenant to improve partnership? It's this idea of creating behavioral and attitudinal commitments to one another that will help managers in teams, or like Seth said earlier, any partners, to feel supported and be successful. As Seth and I jokingly showed you, it's a signed document that you can look at that focuses, instead of what I expect from Seth, it's what I owe Seth, what we have agreed I have to deliver. And then you can review it, you can look at it. And this, we'll talk more about it later, but this is the second reason Then I became a zealot for this process. And then the whole idea is that it provides a place for the routine exchange of developmental feedback and praise. We don't give praise at work enough. And this gives a very specific process for saying, you can do better here. I can do better here. You're doing well here. I'm doing well here.
Tim, no naming, no shaming, but just yesterday, we were with two groups, the senior leadership group of a medical department and the rank and file of that medical department. The senior group was about 6 or 7 people. The rank and file was about 35. They have a covenant developed months ago. This was their first review we facilitated. And what was amazing was to see this helpful exchange of constructive feedback, the opportunity both sides had to look at their covenant and ask, how are we doing? How could we be better? There's no question the level of partnership and trust went up in that room just based on that hour review.
Yep.
So, how does
Okay,
this
so
process
Seth,
work?
I'm going to turn it over to you. And Seth has promised us. I'm gonna set my timer. He has promised us to get through the next set of slides in 3 minutes. Let's see how he
Oh
does.
my goodness. Well then, I know Tim's going to roll his eyes, but Tim, I've got the prop. All right, we have a scissors and a pen. So let's say Ryan West, who's one of our participants today, is a manager. Ryan, you are the scissors. All right, so Ryan, you are going to create 2 lists in relationship to your team. What do you owe your team so they feel supported and can be successful? And what do you expect from your team so you feel supported and can be successful? So Ryan writes on the first list, I provide coaching, I'll provide information, I'll allow them trust and input in decisions that affect them. I will hold regular meetings, I will support their professional development, et cetera, et cetera. The team, his staff, his direct reports, let's call it 7 of them, create a mirror list. What do they owe Ryan so that he will be supported and feel successful? And what do they expect from Ryan? So look at Ryan's first question. What do I owe? Look at the team's second question. What do we expect? We expect helpful coaching. We expect feedback. We expect work-life balance. We expect opportunities for input. We expect to be empowered. So we compare these 2 lists, Ryan's what I owe, the team's what we expect, and I jokingly call it peanut butter and jam. We merge them so that we have one integrated, consolidated list, which Ryan then signs and dates and agrees to give himself feedback and agrees to receive feedback on it. So that's the manager covenant. Now we flip gears. The team shares, here's what we owe. And Ryan shares, here's what I expect. And again, these are compared, contrasted, brought together, merged, integrated, and then the team signs it. So we have 7 signatures there, and they agree to review that list from time to time and receive feedback from Ryan. But the point is, both lists are really, what can I do to help the other side, the other team, my partner, feel supported and be successful? Because if I do it for them, the odds are high they're going to do it for me. It's enlightened self-interest is what it is. So by focusing on your covenant and what you need to do, it puts the agency and onus on you, knowing full well that if you do that in a robust way, your partner will also be focused on how to help you feel supported, and you'll get it back in spades.
And
So,
it goes
did it in
back to
3
that.
minutes.
And it goes back to that that original origin story image, that image we had commissioned for the book. We had somebody draw that for us, with the manager in one side bailing furiously, and the team in the other side saying, oh, good thing it's not our problem, when they're all going down together. And we put the manager in one side and the team in the other, but it could have been drawn just as easily the other way. And I'm sure any of you who lead out there, you've been in a situation where you're bailing furiously and your team has no idea. And I'm sure all of you who have been on a team, you've been in situations where you have bailed furiously and your leader has no idea. And the goal here is to build that together. In some ways, it has, and I'm sure a lot of you have talked about servant leadership. It has some servant leadership qualities, but in servant leadership models, it's one way. It's the leader as a servant to the team. I'm obligated to the team, which is great. But In this case, I will also add that it's the team beholden to the leader too. I love, Seth, that term, enlightened self-interest.
And it gets to the reciprocity, doesn't it? It gets to the mutuality of important partnerships. There's always a mutuality and a reciprocity. And it's important that both sides go the extra distance, go, that 51% or more. So Tim, please take this.
Okay, in the chat box, if you are a leader or in an important partnership, maybe the best partner you were thinking of earlier, whatever it is, it could be a third party, it could be your boss, it could be your team, it could be a peer. What is an obligation you would want to put in your covenant? So type it into the chat box. Give us some of the obligations that you think would be important for you to help to serve your key work partner so that they would feel supported and be successful. So type away. Availability, excellent.
Yep, honor your commitments, communicate your plan.
Yeah,
These are all good items for a
great.
covenant. Candor, transparency. Yes, I worked on a covenant this week. Transparency was the magic word.
Again, the second one. Yeah.
Yeah. Bringing your whole self, communicate clearly, act with integrity. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we've been talking about this lately, this bringing your whole self, the idea of being present, and not
Communication,
physically
open
present, but
door.
emotionally present. So it's so important.
Recognize their work. Yes, being
Oh,
authentic, consistency, provide
Yeah.
constant support, clear communication.
So yes,
Tim,
you
maybe
get
you can also quick talk to, as these are coming in, the notion that while some themes may be similar between groups, the importance of every group doing its own.
one of the quotes at the beginning, which is my favorite quote in that list, by Kurt Lewin, is people become more committed to things they help create. As a firm principle of Kurt Lewin, the founder of organization development, action research, group dynamics, teamwork, my area, community psychology. What a brilliant man he was. And he talks about you need people to do things for themselves in order to gain that commitment. And, I'm an organizational psychologist and we do lots of research and I could absolutely take all the lists that Seth and I have, and I could do a factor analysis with, I don't know, whatever, a Vermax rotation on it, and say, here are the top 8 things we're going to give you your covenant, and you're going to do this. But, I'm pointing at you on purpose, not rudely, but as a joke, because they didn't create that. People are more committed to things that they help to create. That quote to me is so important. And so, um, now we're going to
Yeah,
talk very briefly about the second reason for why I became a zealot. And that's that this idea, our publisher is actually a publisher for books on continuous improvement, quality improvement. And we picked that publisher. We had a choice of 3, and we picked this one purposefully because this part of Taylor and Francis focuses on something that's important to us, which is building a relationship is not a one-shot deal. And I'm going to make fun of myself because years ago I did what I call now Tim's Top 10 Tips for Teams, a program I do. Seth, the Canadian, says I should call it Tim Bits of Wisdom, but I still haven't been able to do Tim Bits of Wisdom. So, but I did
to
this.
Tim Hortons coffee shop. Someone doesn't
And
know.
so I did this program for a nonprofit group homes locally, and great work. I'm wonderful. Look how great I am. I did this great program. Everybody loved it. And then in the last group home, out of 4 on the second program, so after 8 of these programs I delivered, somebody says, "Hey, Tim, these ideas are great, but how do we sustain them?" And I threw up my hands and said, "Come, hire me some more to follow up. What do you say in that situation?" And all of you in organization development, organizational learning, workforce education, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the sustaining. And this is a sustained process, which is why the second reason why I became a zealot, because you start off, you plan, you create these lists, and then there's this constant checking and adjusting where we go through and review them regularly in one-to-ones with leaders, in meetings, in formal reviews that should happen every 2 to 3 months, starting with an outside facilitator, but ending where, as good OD people, we give this away to the people who are doing it.
We
And
also
so,
show it to new members who join the team and prospective new members. We share with them the covenant and say, if you join our group, this is what you're signing up for. And it gives them a nice snapshot of what culture is and what some of the obligations that will be on their part.
okay, so as promised, if you love research, here you go. Seth and I did 2 research studies. We did a pilot study with about 8 teams where we collected data pre and post covenant and found that in our pilot work, empathy went up, respect went up, trust went up. In our later work, we did a longitudinal study. And in our longitudinal study were, I don't know, 10 to 12, 15 teams. We collected data from the team members, we collected data from the team leaders, and we collected data from the outside leader, whoever the team leader reported to. So in some cases, it was the CEO. We did it over a period of over 6 months. We collected data, pre-test data before delivering the covenant, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And what this showed was that alignment went up, partnership went up, team performance went up. Again, there's performance metrics, and conflict went down. And so it's pretty clear that we have good research behind this. It works. So now I'm going to skip this slide, but we'll put it in our slides when we send them to Isa and Jose, and I'm going to move it to Seth, the last slide.
Okay. Well, Tim talked about that 1938 Harvard study, and we know that relationships matter to happiness. And the book, as you've gathered, is about how to create effective partnerships all the time. When you thought about your best and worst partner, and think about your best partner, it begs the question, why were they your best partner? How did they become like that? How did they become supportive, caring, coaching, sense of humor, all that stuff you wrote in the chat? Well, fact of the matter is you got lucky, either by wiring or temperament or good training or mentoring. That person was a great partner for whatever reason. But the question we answer in the book is, how do you make sure that happens all the time? How do you ensure that best partnerships are the rule, not the exception? Your work relationships are never as good as you think. I think, Tim and I get along great, but I'm sure if he were honestly to tell you what he thinks of me, I'd hear things just be mind-blowing. So, it never hurts to open the hood and ask. And this process really gets you to ask the question, how are these work relationships? How are these partnerships? What could be better? We are big believers in dialogue. There's been a lot written on what dialogue is as opposed to discussion or debate, and we use it as a tool both to enhance work partnerships, but also as a measurement. How good are these work partnerships? Because the better the dialogues, the better the partnerships. Routine praise and appreciation, absolutely indispensable. Don't fear feedback, fear not getting it. Like the human body, relationships need healing. All relationships, our personal ones, our professional ones, go up and down. I think with this process, though, it's like a yo-yo on an escalator. Think about that metaphor, a yo-yo on an upward moving escalator. On any given day or week, things will go up and down a bit. But with a workplace covenant in place and a way to review issues before they become crisis or become very severe, this allows you to maintain and constantly improve the quality of the work partnership. I want to talk for a moment about support. We've mentioned it a few times. Picture this. You ever see those military guys on TV and they're wearing night vision goggles? Remember those night vision goggle guys, the soldiers? And with the goggles on, they see things you'd never see at daytime, right? They see the animals, they see the bats flying, they see the critters on the ground, they see the bad guys. If you look at the workplace through support colored glasses, looking for where support is happening and not happening. You will be shocked, surprised, and astounded at what you see that you didn't see before. Because if every relationship can be analyzed through support glasses, is it happening? Is it not happening? Is this manager doing what he or she should for their team? Are these team members doing what they should and could for each other? Is this team doing what it needs to for its partner team? So I encourage you to look at your organization, and if you're a manager, look at your team and ask the question, is support happening? How could it be improved? And how can you use this tool to do it? So last, be brave, don't wait. Please get the book. Please feel free to reach out. Tim and I have all kinds of reach outs from on LinkedIn and emails from people who have read the book. We're delighted to engage with you. It's obviously not a money thing for us. We just want to hear your ideas and hear how you're applying them. And we're happy to provide any advice that would be useful. So with that, I think we are ready for questions.
Okay, we've got quite a few questions in the QA. So open up the QA, Seth, because you'll see we've got 3 questions already, some good ones. And we've got one from Paul Thorson in the chat box, which is a great one too. So pick one to go over, Seth.
Well, shall we start with the first one? As a president of a nonprofit member association, I recently attempted to establish a covenant charter with my board members. Is there a correlation between the effectiveness of a covenant and worker role in terms of paid versus volunteer, part-time versus full-time employees?
Because didn't you do this? Didn't you do this at your temple?
We actually didn't. I did it between the principal, the director of education, and his teacher staff.
Okay.
Didn't do it there.
Okay.
Lots of reasons.
Because I've never done it with volunteers.
Yeah,
So.
the quick answer is it absolutely works with volunteers. I have in other situations, actually at the Red Cross, where they had volunteers who help with blood drives, they did it. So it absolutely can work. I think our notion of a covenant is a little different than the typical team charter. If you read our book and based on what Tim has said with the follow-ups, ours has a lot of structure. Ours requires signatures. Ours has every 3-month formal reviews as well as informal review and assessment that go on in between. And it absolutely can work with volunteers. Tim, why don't you take the next?
Well, I'm going to take the one that is in the chat box by Paul. And by the way, I hope I'm saying your name right, Gentil. She asked about the measurement tools. Yes, we give these measurement tools away. On one of the last slides, my website is up there. I'll make sure they're on the website today. So I'll do that right after this presentation. You can have the measurement tools. She asked about alpha coefficients. I can drop those on there. So we have the data on that. I'm happy to give that information out there. So and Paul, I think Seth just answered part of your question. It is far different than a team charter because a team charter focuses on expectations and we focus on obligations. Yes, we have the slide we skipped is creating a team covenant. What are our obligations, which is very similar to a team charter. However, in this case, we're really talking about the leader and the team. And, Seth's a leadership expert and I'm a teams expert. And Seth has programs he delivers on. Here's the 8 top things, a leader should do. And there's so many books on this. And I, jokingly have my Tim's 10 top 10 tips for teams. And all these books, all these ideas wag fingers at people and say, here's what you need to do. Ours doesn't do that. It has leaders in teams and says, how do we improve our relationship by focusing on what you need? And it has the follow-up. So are there other things that out there that can build meaningful partnership? Absolutely. I think ours is one way, and there are other ways. I think ours is a really good way because it focuses on obligations and it has fixed, regular, ongoing reviews where you have to do them. So
I'd like to take 2 questions that are in the Q&A that are very similar. One is, can you speak to the executive tendency to dismiss feedback that comes from employees in a larger organization? And a similar question, can you speak to the tendency of executives to explain away feedback they may receive from an employee survey, for example? Well, the word here is hubris, Hubris, which means arrogance, presumptive, ego. And of course, we have seen this. I think an executive that does this is on some level saying, I don't want to get better. I'm okay with where I am or where we are. It's like a mediocre, I'm a hockey guy. I watch the NHL all the time. I have my teams. It's like a team that's in the middle or lower end of their division, and they're happy to be there and they don't really want to strive to do better. But feedback is the breakfast of champions, said Ken Blanchard. And he's absolutely right. If you look at any all-star athlete, individual Olympic athletes, sports teams, any kind of professional who's trying to get better will have a coach and they'll get feedback. It is the most powerful form of improvement known to man. Feedback helps you get better. So when executives dismiss this stuff, or they look at, the feedback in a covenant or employee surveys, that's their mindset. That's kind of reflective of their own ego and defense mechanisms. And, you could peel that away a little bit and say, well, why is that? And what's going on with them? Why the fear? But fundamentally, in terms of the organization, they are not allowing the organization to grow. And not all feedback is equally valuable. I get that. But I think executives who just dismiss it whole hog are missing a huge opportunity and a way to improve.
So, Seth, like you, I'm going to take two questions at once, which is the question about when team communication is broken down and when there's a lot of emotional baggage. And I'm going to say a few things about this. Number one is, does this always work? No. It is not a panacea. Anybody who tries to sell you the oil that works all the time, go back to 1900 and I'll sell you some other, some some swampland to build your house on. No, it doesn't always work. Does it work often? Most of the time? Absolutely. Most people want to do better at work. Very few people come to work and say, yeah, I want to be an ass today. I'm going to be rude to people. I'm going to be miserable, make other people miserable. People don't do that. They don't think that way. They think, how can I get better? Most people. But are there teams where this won't work? Absolutely. Are there, as Seth, is there hubris in some leaders where it won't work? Absolutely. And in fact, we've run into both of those situations. It's rare, but it does happen. Now, I will say, with a team or a leader, where there is broken down relationships, like any good process, you have to till the soil a little first. So this is another tool we're suggesting for your toolbox. You'll have lots of tools on developing teams and leadership. You might want to do some conflict management work ahead of time, or some other work on dialogue ahead of time, to some training programs on team development, whatever it is. But I've found that sometimes a few sessions tilling the soil ahead of time can help with that. So, and then I will also say that one of the chapters we devote in the book, it's chapter 10. Seth, you remember better than I do what the titles of the chapters are. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast, and you remember everything.
Senior moments,
So,
Tim. They're happening to
yeah.
us more and more.
So
The
chapter
more
10
my
in our-
hair goes, the more my senior moments happen.
So chapter 10 in our book is devoted to that. It's purposeful because we actually say, of course, it doesn't always work. Anybody who does that is,
Yeah.
selling you the snake oil. So
yeah. I've got two quick questions here. One is, how do we get executives to embrace the skills for engaging in employee dialogue, such as facilitation, conflict resolution, et cetera? Well, leaders have to continuously learn. John F. Kennedy said it lovely. He said it's learning and leadership are indispensable to each other. I'll say that again. Learning and leadership are indispensable to each other. Effective leaders constantly learn. And I think the skills of facilitation, of coaching, of knowing the difference between managing and leading, these are essential topics. And I would encourage any leader to plan at least probably 3, 4, 5 days a year in training on leadership, beyond any marketing or strategy or other things or conferences that they would go to for their industry. I would encourage them to look at the whole art and science of leadership. There's another question here that I find very intriguing. My organization has a culture of nice, and I sometimes find accountability is missing element, specifically in terms of young new leaders not understanding how to effectively hold their team members accountable. There is a generational thing there. I'm curious how you see accountability fitting into the ERTAP model. So first of all, covenants do ensure accountability because there's these quarterly reviews, and you start by rating yourself. So am I accountable? And then you provide the feedback to your partner. And we typically ask that a client use us or use an outside third party at least 3 times to get the flow of it and to create that environment of safety, psychological safety around the covenant review. But it absolutely holds people's feet to the fire around their commitments. Now, in terms of culture of nice, that's not a bad thing. I suppose if key issues are being ignored and people are putting their head in the sand, that's a different story. But better to have a culture of civility and polite and empathetic than the opposite. Having said that, of course, accountability is important. Tim and I wrote a nice little 2-page thing. Perhaps we can put it in the chat, Tim. You can't have accountability without clear expectations. So the clearer those expectations are and the more they're discussed and agreed to, the more you can have accountability. Tim?
Well, I think we're getting the hook because I'm watching Isa
Yeah.
and Jose moving along, and I know they have some closing words. So I'm sorry, there's 2 more questions in the QA, but do we have time to answer those, or should we end here? I'm looking at our moderators.
Yes. How many questions do we have left? I think
There's
we
2
covered
left.
more.
Yep.
Yeah, we can go at least with one of them.
Okay. So I can answer. One is more of a comment. It does have some risks. Agreed. Whoever said that, yeah, it does. It again works more often than it does not. It's a great tool, but it is not without, especially when you have a leader team that is dysfunctional. And the other one I can actually answer fairly quickly too. Is there any data from one side creating obligations and not the other? No. We don't have that because we look at the space in between. Seth has a great analogy. Seth is like a 17th degree black belt. He is actually, I think, what, a 3rd degree black belt, whatever it is. And he's judged some. Step in whenever you want because you can describe
sparring.
Sparring.
Sparring. Yeah, 2 people, doing mock fighting.
And to figure out who wins, you don't look at one person or the other, you look at the space in between. And to us, that's the most important thing, is building this relationship, that space in between the leader and team. So we always look at the whole.
This has been fun. Thank you so much, Penn State. Thank you very much, Dr. Bill Rothwell. Thank you very much, Issa and Jose. Love doing this and hope these concepts are useful to you. And, at the risk of shameless self and Tim promotion, please get the book. Please check it out. Please write a paper on it or use it in your consulting practice or share it with your clients or your VPs of HR. And we would be delighted to follow up with you. You can reach us. I think there's some information here about how to reach us. Tim and I are both on LinkedIn. We both have emails. We both have websites. Or you can just, Google us.
Sure.
For me, it's Seth R. Silver, Timothy.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Franz and Dr. Silver. We like to just be on time. On behalf of our OD&C or Workforce Education Program, we hope that you all think that the webinar was very helpful. And if we did not get your question, please send us an email using the information that we provided in the chat box. For the future webinars, we would like to hear your feedback as well on today's webinar. Please take the survey using the link provided in the chat box. And for your information, our next webinar is about OD Essence, Take the Core of the Field Forward on the 21st century by Dr. David Jameson on March 29th. At the same timing, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern timing. And as you know, all registration for all events are free and can be found on our website. You can also find us again on our social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, which is X. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Have a good day and have a good night to our guests from other time zones. Thank you so much.
All the best.
Thank you so much.